Larry, a COVID-19 tragedy, written and narrated by Peter J. Merrick. I should be spending this Saturday working on the manuscript for Killing Crypto, the sequel to Adrian C. Spitters, and my book, It Starts With Gold. Thankfully, that little book found an extraordinary audience around the world and became an international bestseller. Instead, I found myself thinking about Larry. The recent Anthony Fauci hearings unexpectedly took me back to one of the darkest chapters of my lifetime. They reminded me of those haunting years when billions of people experienced lockdowns, isolation, when I had broken businesses, broken families, broken friendship, and losses that many of us may never fully recover from. As I sat quietly in front of my keyboard this morning, one memory refused to leave me. Larry, 2 weeks before the truckers' protest in Ottawa, captured the attention of Canada and much of the world. I wrote the article you're about to read. For many Canadians, the truckers' protest became a defining moment where ordinary citizens stood together for personal freedom, civil liberties, and the right to be heard. What happened next changed my life in ways I never expected. The article spread across social media and was read millions of times. What I remember most during that time, I received dozens of emails from Canadian government employees telling me they had been reprimanded for sharing it through their internal government communication networks. Then something else happened. For writing what I believed to be the truth and refusing to remain silent, I watched my reach quietly disappear. I found myself shadow banned, permanently suspended, or simply made a non-person across several of the largest social media platforms in the world. I may never again have the audience I once had. Do I regret writing this article about my friend Larry? Not for a single second. The great Mexican revolutionary Emiliano Zapata once said, "It is better to die on your feet than to live on your knees." Those words meant something to me then. They mean even more to me today. This article was never really about politics. It was never about going viral censorship or social media. It was about my friend. It was about Larry. Through his life and through losing him, I found a way to express a grief that I suspect millions, perhaps billions, quietly carried within themselves during those difficult years. To this very day, I still mourn Larry's loss. Perhaps I always will. What follows is more than an article. It is my tribute to a good man and to a period of history that changed us all forever. January 5th, 2022. Taking things away until one says yes is not a choice. Written by Peter J. Merrick. I wish I could introduce you to Larry. If you knew him, you would love him. By knowing Larry, you immediately understood why he owned every room he ever entered. He was the unofficial mayor of every community he became part of. Larry is gone. Let Larry's story and death be the call to action, the catalyst to speak your truths from the top of your lungs. It has become mine. And this essay is me yelling from the rooftops that we are in the worst trouble of all, a truth that should never be silenced to wrongdoings. To be silenced is to allow yourself to become a slave. This is worse than death itself. To be a slave to an immoral system run by those that are allowed to rule unjustly, illegally, sadistically, and satanically over us. I wish I could pick up the phone right now to call Larry to tell him about my day. I hope this tribute to my friend will begin my personal healing process and give honor to a life cut unnecessarily too short. Since the call, I walk about my days in San Diego, thinking back to my old life and what I loved most about living in Toronto. Now I find myself muttering, I miss my big soul brother, Larry. In my world, he was one of those unique individuals that made my memory of Toronto memorable home. How best to describe him? Who was Larry Lipyak? This is the question I keep asking myself. In my world, Larry was bigger than life. My journey was made much richer because of his kindness, wit, smarts, wisdom, charm, friendship, and love. I can still hear our laughter. Just thinking of Larry makes me smile. As I type this sentence. I can still see his big grin in my head. He was in the plus column for all who were privileged to call him friend. Larry was so special in that way. He just made life bigger, funnier, better, and livelier. He had the most infectious smile. No one had a better sense of humor. Whatever your situation, Larry had the unique gift to give you a new perspective while making your ribs hurt from laughter. There was a way and wisdom about him that made life a little less serious and more light. It feels like yesterday when we first met. It was the night of Halloween 2001, in the weeks following 9/11. Looking back, those events were the starting point of our democracy's dark descent into totalitarianism. I remember after our first conversation that evening being filled with soulful laughter, I left saying to myself, I really like this guy, Larry. Everyone loved Larry. Imagine the deep connection you have to a brother. He had that enchanting charm about him. He made everyone feel like they were family, that you were special, that your life counted. He was always open to lending a helping hand and sharing his ear, giving guidance to those who were smart enough to ask for it. Our meeting was synchronistic. He was a practicing wills and estate lawyer. I was in need of his services to complement my financial planning business. Back then, I was an active certified financial planner with dozens of clients that needed their wills completed. My clients all loved being introduced to Larry. How could they not? Over 2 decades later, I am still asked, how is your good friend Larry, saying, I really liked him. He was funny, professional, charming, thorough, and a very memorable character. Yes, he was a bigger-than-life character. Larry was one of the most gifted communicators I had ever witnessed in action. Live audiences, radio listeners, television viewers, and commentators would almost wet their pants listening to him sharing his endless stories, observations, jokes, and anecdotes. I remember one evening watching Larry sell hundreds of his do-it-yourself will kits on the home shopping cable channel. I fell off my seat laughing when a mother called into the live show asking if they could set him up with her daughter. That was Larry. Peculiar things always came his way. At the dawn of the new millennium, Larry had been recently divorced, and boy, could he make you laugh about the lessons and bruises he learned from it firsthand. Only Larry could get away and carry off his next project with his flair for theatrics and dry sense of humor. He wrote a best-selling book titled I Had Dreams of a Happy House. Now I'm a Former Spouse. In it, he shared his misadventures of navigating dating, marriage, divorce, parenting, the legal system, and how to survive to the other side. Larry was a fun, harmless, lovable, playful neurotic. He owned this title with pride. Even though he was the most extraordinary salesman and marketer you would ever meet, unfortunately, this was not enough for him. He needed his patterns and security requirements met. You could set your clock by Larry's schedule. This anxiety eventually took hold of him. It prevented him and the world from fully realizing his true potential and enjoying his innate charms. In late 2003, Larry decided to go back to Transport Canada as a prosecuting attorney, where he had worked for the first decade after he had graduated from law school. Boy, did he love the thoughts of future security and the comforts of a government job. The ability to pilot airplanes and that damn guaranteed government pension that he so looked forward to and relished having in retirement. Larry had so much to look forward to. He had lots of friends and family that adored him, a large government pension, plenty of savings in the bank, and a pending magistrate judgeship appointment after he retired. Though the COVID lunacy and the tyrants administrating this tyranny took away all that he had to look forward towards. Larry was a proud Canadian, and he believed in Canada, a country founded on the rule of law, its 1982 Constitution, and its Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is why he watched in horror as the governments of Canada broke the social contract they had with each of its citizens, quickly stripping away his and his fellow Canadians' rights of having complete autonomy over their own bodies, their healthcare choices, their privacy, the rights to movement, the right for the freedom of association, the right of freedom of speech, and to be treated equally under the law. Larry was not an anti-jabber. He had every shot known to man before this last one. He was the epitome of health. He was also a lawyer, and a damn good one at that. Through his training and experience, he read every word and every label and every contract to comprehend what he was getting himself into. He had decided that no one was going to force him to sign on to an experimental medical procedure without his informed consent. An experimental medical procedure that had not been proven to work or to be safe. Larry would share that he believed that these morally bankrupt elected representatives, unelected bureaucrats, corporate and non-governmental organizational gangsters lied to us each day, telling us that their motives behind their mandates are pure and their punishments were in our best interest. Larry was a cautious individual. He liked easing into his change, but because of all the illegal mandates stripping him of his human rights, he felt forced into making some quick, dramatic life changes to secure his personal freedoms. If the events of the past 2 years had not been thrust upon him, he would have eased slowly into his transition, and we would still have my friend with us today. He was a workaholic. Having banked 85 days of vacation pay and 30 days of sick leave, he was going to take a long vacation permanently to Mexico to retire. This would allow him to avoid being put on administrative leave without pay because he chose to rightfully keep his medical information private from his employer, the government of Canada. Larry booked a first-class one-way ticket to Acapulco for October 28th. 2021, one day before the mandates were to be enforced, denying all Canadians the right to fly on planes if they did not have their jab papers in order. The day Larry arrived in Mexico, he received a courtesy call from Ontario Health, the Ontario province administrator of its single-payer socialistic medical plan, to tell him that he had not gotten his shot and they would gladly arrange his appointment to get his. He did not know what made him more upset, the fact that his medical privacy had been breached unlawfully by his government, or that call had originated from an outsourced call center contracted in Pakistan. I was so proud of Larry for making such a big move, taking hold of his destiny. We spoke regularly for the first few weeks while he was in Acapulco. I had planned to visit him for a few weeks to explore Mexico and to give him some familiarity of home as he adjusted. I was hard on Larry during some of our phone conversations when he would sometimes say in passing that he was thinking about going back to Canada. Being a Canadian in exile and living with the thought of never seeing his native home again made him very upset, anxious, and sad. Towards the end of his stay, I received this text that summed up how he was feeling living away from home in self-imposed exile. I am better today. Let me just thank Peter. I really thank you for what you said yesterday. 62 years of conditioning has fucked me up. When I put my mind to anything, I can do it. Larry often stated that he knew what awaited him if he returned to Canada. To him, the Canada he had once loved had fallen to full-blown totalitarianism. Upon his return, he would be locked away in his home under house arrest, not allowed to participate in regular society, having his basic human rights stripped away and denied him. All orchestrated by the tyrannical, mechanical, anti-human regime that had whipped up Canadians into mass hysteria, into fearing normal contact with one's own neighbors, their family, and fellow Canadians. All this discrimination sanctioned by a tyrannical government that aimed to discriminate against its citizens that legally chose to exercise their guaranteed Canadian constitutional rights to say, no, my body, my choice. It had been a few days since I had last heard from Larry. I was beginning to become worried. By this time in his stay in Mexico, he was only communicating through text. In one of my last texts to him, I sent this JPEG to celebrate his transition into his new stage of life. The title of this short JPEG, encouragement, is you survived the biggest psyop in human history. If you still have not caved to the powers that be, take a moment and recognize what you have endured. You survived what many believe was the greatest psychological operation in human history. A campaign decades in the making. Enormous amounts of time, money, resources, and effort were devoted to influencing how people thought, behaved and responded. Every possible method seemed to be employed. People were manipulated, pressured, frightened, shamed, confused, and encouraged to question not only their beliefs, but at times their own reality. Principles, values, morals, and ethics were tested, while families, friendships, and communities were divided in ways few of us had ever witnessed before. Almost everyone felt the weight of those years. If you remain true to your convictions despite the pressure, pause for a moment and acknowledge what you have overcome. You stood your ground when it was easier to surrender, and rather than falling to your knees, you rose like a phoenix from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more certain of who you are. Well done. After that text, I did not hear back from Larry for a few days. The change he had embarked on 6 weeks earlier had been too much for him to handle. His last text to me was sent on December 12th, 2021, and it read, "Hi, Peter. I came back to Canada. Please don't be mad at me. Please don't call me now. I have to sleep. I have to keep my phone on because the government calls regularly to check in on me, to make sure I stay locked down and locked in my home. When I'm up to it, I will call you. I am very down. I just hope I can continue living like this. I love you. It was my decision to come back, and I have to live with it. I felt too vulnerable and was scared if I got sick there, I would be all alone. I was not having a good time there because I was so anxious." Larry. That was the last time I heard from Larry. I tried multiple times to reach out to him, but there was no response. Then 2 weeks later, I got the dreaded call. Larry was found dead at his home in Toronto on Sunday, December 26, 2021. Now Larry is dead. There is no pension. There is no security. There is no retirement. There is no doubt in my mind Larry was a casualty to this tyranny brought onto all of us. Commencing March 2020, no one can silence me nor will convince me in believing otherwise. One of Larry's last wishes was to have his ashes spread over the Pacific Ocean. I hope to be there when this wish is granted. There was a memorial service for him a few days before the end of 2021 at his home in Toronto. I felt fortunate to watch on a cell camera as so many people celebrated Larry's life. There are two types of individuals we meet as we walk this earth, givers and takers. Larry, for so many, was a life giver, not just to me, but also to countless others. Since Larry's passing, I have listened to story after story about how much he had touched their lives. Individuals from all walks of life in positive, important, meaningful, and magical ways. One individual life may not seem that important in the big scheme of things. What is important is the meaning that we draw from witnessing that life lived. I am so proud to have witnessed and been a part of Larry Lippick's life and him being on my journey as well. I am not upset at Larry for leaving us much too soon. However, I am plenty mad at those that brought us into this current dystopian era and the overwhelming number of sleeples that have acquiesced to tyranny, evil, and tyrants. In the waning days of 2021, we lost Larry. For me, he was not just another nameless casualty to the stupidity and tyranny that we all have suffered during this worldwide hoax perpetrated by criminals on the entirety of humanity. Peter J. Merrick, A.K.A. Old Fart. I still mourn those days. I still mourn my friend, Larry Lippick. I will not forget what we lived through. I will not forget those who paid the price. And I will never surrender my voice to fear because silence has never protected freedom. I hope you will join me in the pursuit of truth, justice, and the sovereignty of the human spirit.